What's going on, y'all? It's your boy Cool Colas here, and you are now tuning into a new episode of the Pro Black Blurred Kingdom Podcast. On today's episode, I wanted to take this in a different direction. And usually in my previous episodes, I've mainly focused on exploiting and pointing out where anti-black racism takes place in entertainment and in blurred media. But today, I want to talk a little bit to y'all about wrestling and where I have seen anti-blackness show up specifically in the WWE. Now, when it comes to wrestling, I have been a fan since as long as I can remember. Even in school, high school specifically, I used to wrestle. As a matter of fact, I wrestled for 3 years. It took me a minute to, get the hang of it, but eventually it became a sport that I really loved. From my sophomore year through my senior year, as a matter of fact, I wrestled, and my weight class was 152 pounds. At my school, the wrestling program had launched for the first time ever in my sophomore year of high school, so I was among the first to be a part of it, as a matter of fact. And what I learned from wrestling is that it's a very mental sport, even more than it is physical. And it takes a lot of thought and precision and grace and fluid movements to really execute all the moves in a way that's effective. And it was a good outlet for me too as well, because I was low-key kind of an angry and emotional kid. It was a good way for me to be able to let out a lot of that steam and a lot of those things that I was going through to a certain extent. And there were a lot of reasons for that anger and emotionality, but I'm just more so being real about my circumstance at that time. It was a space for me to sometimes, again, relieve that frustration and to also just be able to get in, very good shape, because when you're a wrestler, you have to be in top-notch shape. You do a lot of running, you do a lot of weightlifting, you do a lot of intense exercises, a lot of stair running, and a lot of push-ups, jumping jacks, and that type of thing. It was something I really enjoyed and something that made me feel unique as well, because a lot of people weren't talking about joining a wrestling team when they were talking about playing sports. Most people were consumed with football and basketball, which were two sports that I really didn't get into like that. Matter of fact, I don't even watch either on TV, and that's for multiple reasons. And I'll kind of get into one of them, actually, since I'm here and I actually brought it up. But one thing that I don't like is that these big time corporations like NFL are just, to me, big ass plantations that are kind of like minstrel shows that grind away at the athletes. And I get it, there are some that are white, and there's like non-white, non-black athletes on the field as well too, but there are a significant amount of black athletes that are a part of this. And I don't know, y'all, it kind of feels like a slave-esque type of deal in some ways when you really look at it. Also, I just have never really had an interest in just watching sports on TV all day. I felt like I had better things to do. And if that's your thing and you like watching it and you're really into sports, you're really into seeing teams play, whether it's football, whether it's basketball, more power to you, but it just never was really my thing. Even, back in the day, I remember that, people at my school would try to play me about wrestling too, and they would say stuff like, it was gay and all this other stuff, like all this like really funny shit. A lot of people would be like, you in spandex and touching at the knee. They used to say shit like that. And I remember in college there was this dude who I also used to go to high school with as well, and I was in the cafeteria this one time and I was sitting down, I was smashing some wings or some shit and this dude comes down to sit at the table with me. and some other people who I was kicking it with at the time. And I was like, in high school he was cool, so yeah, let this dude come down and kick it with me and my friends and stuff like that. I didn't really care. My thing was like, I know you back in high school, you seemed decent back then, so come to the table and kick it with us. And by the way, this dude that I'm about to talk about, he used to play football, so I wanted to put this all in context before I tell you the story. So, let me tell y'all, I was kind of surprised because this nigga came with some real funny style ass energy. Like, I don't know what the fuck was up with him. Because, like, in high school, he was cool. But in college, like, he was just on some weird shit. And he was up here bringing up, the fact that I used to wrestle and shit. And he was like, man, remember we used to say you wrestling dudes were gay? He was sitting there giggling and shit like a sassy ass bitch. I don't even remember how it even got brought up, but it got to that point where he made some type of point like that. And I'm like, nigga, what can be any more suggestive than wearing a bunch of tight ass pants and then having a bunch of men bent over, and some are even standing behind a damn quarterback who was reaching underneath another man's ass and nuts to get a big brown ball. If that isn't one of the most homoerotic roleplay type of things that I've ever seen, I don't know what the fuck is. Then y'all's asses have the nerve to pile up and lay up on top of each other when a ball got fumbled. So you Negroes were chasing after some balls and some booty, okay? But I'm the gay one, okay? All right. This dude then said so. Oh, man, that's different, man. That's different. That's different. You can't look at it like that, man. He started trying to kind of backpedaling a little bit, and and he was kind of just getting on some weird shit. And I was like, yeah, nigga, you right. That's worse. You doing an open male on male orgy, so you can't even talk about me out here, man. Fuck out of here with that bullshit. And again, what I'm saying is not a stab at gay folks. I'm simply making a comparison to how this Negro thought it would be funny to come talking slick to me like that about my sport, and he ended up looking like a damn hypocrite because I ended up calling him out about him playing football because he was real defensive and weird and shit. Like, as soon as I had said, like, look, dog, you trying to play me about like what I really enjoyed in school, so I'm gonna show you like where that's showing up with what you used to do. And you was kind of acting like real jittery and shit, like you had about like 15 or 20 damn cups of coffee and shit. You was acting all weird, and I'm just like, man, get the fuck out of here with that bullshit. Anyway, I just had to tell y'all that story. And I told y'all this before. I can't stand a damn hypocrite. It's literally my biggest pet peeve. And I'll get to that in another time on another podcast, but I just wanted to tell you that quick story and to let y'all know, kind of what happened there. Anyway, back to wrestling. Now, I understand that wrestling and WWE, watching pro wrestling, are not remotely the same. But I just wanted to give that backstory to let you know why I've always enjoyed the idea of wrestling itself. Now, what's different about pro wrestling than watching football or basketball even is that there is this bigger idea of acting and storylines that come into play. To me, it kind of activates my creative side, as a writer. And I've been a wrestling fan as long as I can remember, so I've always enjoyed all elements of it, from the storylines to the gimmicks to the wrestling matches itself to the promos that were cut. And just to give you all a timeline of when I used to watch wrestling, like WWE and stuff like that, I probably watched it religiously from like 2002 until maybe about 2006. And then I stopped somewhere around 06, and I kind of loosely kept up with what was going on over the years. And then I picked it back up and started watching it again around 2013. And what brought me back on this is that I found out that my wife right now was a fan of WWE. And back when her and I were just friends, we would sit on the phone at night and we would talk while watching wrestling from our televisions together, and we would kind of comment on what was going on and stuff like that. Like, it was a way that we kind of bonded even as friends at that time. And it was a way that, you know, we both just mutually got hooked on it and got, you know, super invested in it once again. And at the time, you know, I say there was this group on there that, you know, also really interests me, you know, and really got me back into watching it. And I don't know if you all were fans of WWE, like watching it back in 2013, but the group that really got me like invested on it was The Shield. And I'll get to them in a minute, but I just wanted to say that was a team that really got me reinvested in watching WWE like I used to do when I was in high school. So now, from about 2013 until about 2019, I was again religiously watching WWE. So that was another like 6-year time period that I was, you know, invested in WWE. And I just gotta say that there were a lot of times where that shit just really wasn't all that great. When the wrestler Dean Ambrose, also known as Jon Moxley now on AEW, from The Shield left, and then when they started treating the New Day like trash, especially Kofi Kingston during his title reign, I wasn't really feeling it anymore. And again, I have been still keeping lightly abreast on what's been happening even now in WWE, but I just don't watch it faithfully like I did between 02 and 06 and then 13 and 19. As far as my favorite wrestlers and other things go, I love a lot of the now what people would call old heads. I love The Rock, and I thought dude was funny as shit. I loved Rey Mysterio. He was always like this underdog who whooped ass, and I liked the special move, the 619 too. I thought that was fire. I also liked Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I liked the special move, especially the stunner. Something about that just seemed like just dope, like you just didn't give a fuck, and I love that. I liked the Undertaker. I actually liked Kurt Angle. I liked when dudes would like people would come out in the audience, they would say "you suck" they would say "you suck" chants like when he would come out, and his heel work was really top notch, and I actually was a fan of his special move, the Angle Slam. I also like Randy Orton as a wrestler too, and the RKO is just iconic. I mean, who cannot like that move? But dude was also a huge asshole, and that's also what made his character just dope. There's some others I liked, but those were the big time people I just really enjoyed seeing. And as far as like newer wrestlers, new-ish wrestlers now, there are some, you know, both in the men and women's division that really caught my attention over the years in this new era. One thing about me that I haven't talked about is I really enjoy seeing factions, especially when, you know, these faction of characters start off villainous. And I know when Vince McMahon was running WWE, he wasn't really big into factions or anything like that, but I like to see what they always constructed, because that's where I felt like a lot of that creativity would come out. Some of the new factions that I really enjoyed watching were, first of all, The Shield. I just talked about them. I personally thought they were a literal perfect team. They were 3 different dudes who balanced each other out super well. I love their special move, the triple power bomb, where they would beat the hell out of somebody, and then they would hold up their lifeless ass body, and then Roman Reigns would be in the middle going, like he would throw both of his arms out, and they would just power bomb the hell out of whoever it was that they just picked up. And one of the things, by the way, like I said, that pulled me back into wrestling was watching and seeing how these dudes were like just a big ass threat to everybody. So for those of you who weren't fans, they were again 3 dudes who were wearing these bulletproof vests, like flak jackets, and they had the pants and the boots to match, and they looked like these like guards or soldiers at war, and their combat outfits were all black, and they would come through the stage like where the audience was, instead of actually coming through like the center where most superstars would usually come out, and they would like come out and surround whoever their enemy was. And let me tell y'all, these fools used to take out so many damn people. They would gang up on people and beat the hell out of them and hold their lifeless ass bodies up to be triple power bombed. Like literally, they triple power bombed and surrounded The Undertaker, The Rock, John Cena, Big Show, Mark Henry, Randy Orton, too many damn times to count, Kane, the New Age Outlaws, Shane McMahon, Great Khali. I could keep going. I mean, literally, so many people, and their entrance music was dope as hell too. I also love the faction The New Day as well. They were three goofy Negroes who took you by surprise because they were really a serious tag team. They represented this idea of blurs, actually, because I thought they were three blurs who were silly but also very serious about their craft, and I really had some mad respect for that. And I loved how they were originally done, like how they were originally written. They were three Negroes, like I said, who were also very well balanced, just like the Shield was, and they had some fire ass wrestling skills just like the Shield. As a matter of fact, they fought the Shield in a dope ass match too that I really enjoyed. And these dudes, they used to wear blue and pink, and they would and sometimes they would have these other different outfits that they would wear here and there, and they would do all types of silly shit. But these niggas, by the way, like what I'm talking about, although they were like real silly and goofy and all this other shit, they was dragging fools in the tag team division. So at first, by the way, their characters were good. They were like heroes. But then they made them bad because people weren't really buying their power of positivity gimmick. Like, it wasn't working at first, and so they ended up changing them into bad guys. Then when they turned them bad, I think the way they did it was they made it seem like they were a bit off. Like, yeah, they were jumping around and they were all happy and positive, but there were moments where somebody would kind of like press a button and they would start going off. And so I'll never forget, there was one episode where Big E, who was the powerhouse of the group, got really pissed because of the fact that people were kind of talking about them, because at first they were doing some kooky shit and they had won a match and it was all gravy, but then they started getting booed. And so people are in the audience and they were like, "New Day sucks. New Day sucks." So they were doing something like that, to the rhythm of this, because there's a member on there, Xavier Woods, and he would play this trombone or trumpet. Actually, it was a trumpet, and he would play it and he would go and they would say "New Day sucks," like to the beat of that. And so at one point Big E snapped and he was like, "Are you serious? You all have the nerve to sit here and say we suck after we just wrestled for you? How dare you?" Like, he was going off. Like, I don't know if he exactly said that, but he was going the hell off. He said something in that ballpark. And then these niggas would literally go back to acting silly again after they would snap. See, that's the shit that got them popular. It almost looked like something was wrong with them. They would then act goofy and then get in the ring and then beat the dog shit out of folks. Like, I'll never forget that one episode where they beat down John Cena and had dude literally sitting down against the turnbuckle. So Kofi Kingston would go to the other side of the ring to basically kick John Cena in his face while he was sitting down at the turnbuckle. And while he was doing that, this dude Xavier had this trumpet that he named Francesca. See, you can tell these niggas are goofy just by that. And he would strum the shit out of this trumpet as Kofi was running to kick John Cena in the face. So he would go, and then Kofi would be running as he was doing this to kick him, and he would stop once Kofi kicked him. So they would keep doing this shit over and over again during the match. And as the nigga was all laid out on the ground after being kicked so many times, they would dance and sing, and they would go, Xavier would play the trumpet and be like, dun 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 dun, and he would do that over and over again. And I thought that was the funniest shit ever, y'all. I thought that the audience, I feel like they began to like that shit too, because every time you would do that, I was like, man, what is wrong with these dudes, man? So anyway, as far as factions go, I also like the Wyatt family. At first, there was three of them, but it ended up being four of these people in this faction. And they were like these hillbillies who had this gimmick that was like a cross between The Undertaker and Mankind. And I never thought they really lived up to their deserved potential, but I thought the gimmick itself was really gold, and it was very creative. I remember they had these creepy ass interruptions and videos, and then the shit would just go off randomly. And I remember, like, every time that happened, my eyes would get to bucking when I saw that. I was like, shit, what the fuck just happened? But anyway, so as far as the new shit I've seen, I also like the Hurt Business, but I feel like they did them kind of dirty. The head of the table gimmick was cool, that in the bloodline, whatever you want to call them at this point. And I like the Fiend gimmick as well that they had for Bray Wyatt after, the whole Wyatt family gimmick was done. But again, they ruined that as well. As far as the women goes, I really think most of the black wrestlers are the best wrestlers and my favorite wrestlers. I loved Ember Moon when she was actually on WWE, and I thought she honestly was the best wrestler in the company that I had seen, like as far as like the females go. I love Naomi's beautiful chocolate self as well too. She's very underrated. Sasha Banks is a dope wrestler to me, and I really like, I really liked what she did, and I thought that like she should have been elevated more, as well too, because I thought she was really good. I also really, really like Bianca Belair, and let me just say, man, Bianca Belair is fine as hell, dog. I just gotta say that. Everything about that woman is just working for me, literally. Like, the wrestling is on point. She fine as hell. Feeling the way that she be acting. The gimmick, like literally every damn thing is just working. I don't know. She's kind of bad to me. And come on, y'all, you've seen her. You can't tell me that isn't a beautiful black queen. Anyway, though, I think that, what the way that, her character is getting crafted is very cool. And I like how she's getting elevated now that she's champion. I think she's been champion now for 200 plus days. So I think that's really dope. Despite everything I just said above about WWE, this doesn't remove the fact that this company has a lot of anti-blackness from the wrestlers and all the things that happens both inside and outside the ring. And a lot of it took place in this Vince McMahon-esque era. And I want to bring up a few examples of what I mean, so it doesn't seem like I'm just blowing smoke at this point. There was an incident where Teddy Long, if you don't know who that is, he's this brother who was, he was old school. He used to be, in the wrestling scene back in the day, and he was a general manager as well for SmackDown, I think back in like 2003. And anyway, he said that he had experienced being called a nigger, hardy R, y'all, quite a bit when he was in WWE. And so he started off in this interview that he was in. He was saying that he started off getting called a nigger by a wrestler called Ole Anderson, he was a white boy. And he said even if Ole would know the name of a wrestler or a person who was like in the wrestling scene who was black, he would still call them a nigger, and he didn't care. He even said he was even referring to one of the matches where Ole had, and he was telling him, to back out because like he was refereeing this match. I'm sorry, Teddy Long was refereeing this match, and Ole was, I guess, like a wrestler in it, and he was telling Ole to back out during the match, and Ole turned around and he told him, "Nigger, don't touch me. Don't put your hand on me." And he also talked about a wrestler named Bill Dundee, who was a white wrestler who called him out in front of some people and said, "Can't you see what we're doing here, nigger?" He then started talking about Ric Flair, y'all's boy. Everybody loves Ric Flair so goddamn much. But he talked about how, and this is the thing I really want to get to, how Ric Flair called him a nigger. And so he said there was one day where Ric Flair had walked up to him and kind of like low-key was antagonizing him. He said something about some girls or some shit like that. And then he walked up and said, "Nigga, you like working here?" And he also, when I first heard that, it didn't really surprise me, but it was just interesting that happened. And I'm glad that he, told the story, and he told what happened to him, like spoke his truth. But he also talked about how he had to deal with, wanting to become a manager, and Ric Flair was hating on him and the idea of that being a possibility. But that's y'all's hero though. Ric Flair, that's y'all's hero. A white man who is hailed as a wrestling all-star to this day, who rappers will rap about in their lyrics and claim he's all buddied up with these black rap artists today, like he didn't just spew some anti-black racism to Teddy Long for trying to just get his weight up. Rappers will just be cooning out here and act like he's some type of symbol of glamorousness and flaunting a dope lifestyle, and they're not even like giving any context to all the stuff that he did and he said about people like Teddy Long. And I mean, he's been mentioned in so many songs, and I want to name the numerous number of songs where it shows that rappers are just big upping him all the time. He was in the I Don't Like remix by Chief Keef, Pusha T, Kanye West, Jadakiss, Big Sean, and all that. He was in the song, he was mentioned at some point, there was the outro was Ric Flair in the song We Ball by Dom Kennedy. He was mentioned in the song About That Life by Meek Mill. He was in the song Ric Flair by Killer Mike, who's supposed to be conscious. He was mentioned in the song Ric Flair Again by Cameron. He was mentioned in the song Sweet Serenade by Pusha T. And this is the second time this nigga Pusha T done serenaded him, because the first one was some shit that he said in the I Don't Like remix. He was mentioned in the song Switching Lanes by Tyga, or Switch Lanes by Tyga. He was mentioned in the song New God Flow by Kanye West. And we all know how much of a Sambo Kanye West is. He was mentioned in the song Commando by Migos. He was mentioned in the song Steez by Soulja Boy. I could just really keep going, y'all, but I just wanted to give y'all like how many songs that artists have like just kept, like bringing him up. And I'm not disparaging these artists, because I love a lot of their music. I think a lot of their music is very entertaining and I enjoy it, but I'm just trying to point out, something that constructively and to give some constructive criticism. How soon it is that we forget or fail to try to know about the people that we choose to big up. That's my point here. Hell, there was even something going around about his daughter, Charlotte Flair, who had an issue with her ex-husband, who claimed that she made some racist remarks to a police officer who was black in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I mean, I don't know how true it is, because there are always three sides to a story, yours, theirs, and the truth. But I'd be prone to believe that this really happened, because to me, the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, it would seem. And she seems to be proud of her father's legacy, because she crafted her special move after him, and her entrance and her gimmick to a certain extent, but just a feminine version. She even does that strut like him and woos like him, and WWE supported her and backed her innocence when all of this went down as well too, when they found out about people, or the ex-husband saying that she made racist remarks. And meanwhile, Titus O'Neil, a black wrestler whose gimmick is to be a Q-dog, who got mimicked by Heath Slater, by the way, in the segment. And by the way, I want to go off on a tangent. I bet you hell-bent black Greeks who acted like wet bitches whenever someone black on campus would even mildly mention their fraternity in a light you thought was disrespectful won't even bat an eye because a white man threw up a Q-dog symbol. But I digress. Y'all probably just laugh it off and say he didn't even know any better or some shit. Anyway, going back to Titus O'Neil. He even got suspended for 90 days that got lessened to 60 days for simply grabbing Vince McMahon's wrist to warn him to allow ladies to go first after a match that Daniel Bryan had. And it was for Stephanie McMahon, because he was trying to show chivalry and courtesy. And they had this nigga Titus apologizing and explaining and talking about some, regardless of how harsh it was, it was inappropriate and all this other shit. So anyway, they aren't going to give you the world title for apologizing after being treated like a fourth string jobber. I mean, the spirit of Ole Anderson had came out of Vince and just decided to just treat you like shit. He might as well have said, "Don't you dare touch me, nigga," because that's kind of like the energy that they gave him. Speaking of Vince saying nigga, The second instance I wanted to talk to you all about back in the day when he did this promo with John Cena, where he was rooting him on in a match that he had with Kurt Angle, I believe in 2005. He asked John Cena, "What's good in the hood?" First of all, that's already some hoe ass shit. But anyway, John Cena said, "I'm just holding it down." And then Vince looked at him, and he looked like he was on PCP or some shit, and he said, "Keep it up, my nigga." And he said it just like that. And he sounded like he was hiccuping and shit. I didn't know what was wrong with him. Sound like someone poked him in his ass or some shit. And when he was saying the word nigga, like that shit was strained when it came out. And I'm like, man, if you gonna say it, just say it with your chest. Don't be like a bitch about it, Vince McMahon. Then he had Booker T coming out bucking his eye, saying some shit like, "Tell me he didn't just say that." See, when I was a kid, I thought this shit was funny because Vince looked corny as a hoe. But now I see it's just anti-black racism that he was able to get away with, like a whole lot of other white men who got a lot of bread. And Booker T spoke about the racism he had in WWE outside of this event too, like when I think him and his brother-in-law got called all types of racial slurs when he first debuted, and I think, I think it was by fans to a certain extent. But regardless, that scenario was a part of some of the racism that actually happened. I mean, Booker T had other moments of anti-black racism as well too, such as in 2003 when he was fighting as a top contender to Triple H's World Heavyweight Championship belt, and Triple H cut a promo talking greasy to him, talking real racist, real like white supremacist-ish to him. He told him to dance and do one of those spinneroonies and entertain him because that's his job, and like he was some type of damn Sambo in a minstrel show. Like that shit was crazy. And then he said, "You are here to make people like me laugh." See, whether that was Triple H's idea for a promo or not, he went along with it, and I wasn't with that. With him saying people like me, he was symbolizing the white supremacist who has black folks there to entertain and put shows on for him and do tricks as he watches and laughs. And then he told Booker T, by the way, that his hair was nappy. And he knocked him not mocked the fact that he says sucker all the time. And then Ric Flair's old Hillman's jar looking ass with a robe on was sitting there just smiling and shit. He probably was really just getting a kick out of this. He definitely was out there like saying nigga in the past. So, you already know how he was feeling about it. And then Triple H said, "You are going to do what people like you always do. You are going to lose." So most people were tripped up by the people like you part. But to me, it was all the other shit that he had said in addition that was racist. But here's the worst part about all of it. The part no one talks about. The worst part about all this is Booker T actually did lose to him. So to me, this is how I'm seeing it. Let's say that this whole promo was acted out to tell the story of a king who overcame the racist, privileged white boy who demeaned him and put him down. They turned around and had Booker T lose to Triple H. So now it just looks like unnecessary racism. If anything, it looks like a message was sent to black folks telling them to get in their place. There also was a segment where Booker T and Shawn Michaels and some other white wrestlers had this NWO knockoff group, and the group was having some issues. And at some point, Shawn Michaels said, "Something here doesn't belong." And then he proceeded to super kick Booker T, who was the only black member of the group. And WWE never led up with that action or led it into a storyline where the action that Shawn Michaels did to turn on Booker T was ever explained. So it looked like they were just throwing a jab at him because he was black. It didn't look like it was a thing where he had a personal vendetta against Booker T himself. So that was also a problem. Another racist incident is they had Ted DiBiase and Virgil, who were in a gimmick in the 80s where he was a rich, wealthy white man and Virgil was a black man who was his quote-unquote servant. So it was almost like a slave and slave master type of ordeal. Another incident was when Roddy Piper did blackface. Did y'all know about that? Or did y'all just forget about that? Or y'all just brush that off? And they had him arguing against this little weird blackface alter ego that he had. And he was doing black sense and he was saying shit like, you ain't nothing but a cockroach. And that gimmick was garbage, by the way, too. So if they were going to do something that was racist, at least try to make a good gimmick. But no. They had him doing blackface and having black sense and speaking in Ebonics and speaking like in, messed up English and all this other shit, which was just wrong. They also had a chain of gimmicks for wrestlers portraying them in negative black stereotypes such as the Nation of Domination, which was used to mock this Hotep Black Panther-esque hybrid type of gimmick. They had the Godfather, whose gimmick was a pimp, another black stereotype. They had, again, Virgil, who was a slave, another negative black stereotype. They had Crime Time, which was another negative black stereotype because it looked like it was a thing about blacks being criminals. I mean, I could just keep going on and on and on. And a lot of you all are hearing me and said, and probably are saying, well, Cool Colas, that was in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s and shit. Times be different. Times be different. They don't be doing that no more. And here is why I would tell you little peanut brittle loving goofy Negroes something that you need to hear. It ain't that different. The only thing that is different is the swagger in which they choose to communicate their racism. As a matter of fact, the only incident I can even think of where the racism was overt was in that Hulk Hogan shit where he was caught saying nigger. Matter of fact, let me tell y'all what he said on the transcription of this sex tape audio when he made these racist comments about black folks. This is what he said. I think it was a sex tape audio is what people were saying. He said, so it gets to the point where I don't know if Brooke is his daughter, was fucking the black guy's son or they've been hanging out. Hogan is reported hearing saying, I caught them holding hands together on the tour. They were getting close to kind of, the fucking. I'm not a double standard type of guy, he continued. I'm a racist to a point, fucking niggers. But then when it comes to nice people, I don't give a fuck if she, and this word was inaudible, I'm assuming it said fuck an 8-foot tall basketball player, he says on the recording. If we're gonna fuck with niggers, let's get a rich one. You see, family, I love this type of shit. You know why? Because I want the mask to come right off. Show me that real white supremacist energy so I don't have to fish it out. And so you goofy Negroes who probably have a mouthful of butter biscuits won't say, well, I don't know because that there could be some perception. I don't be thinking it be racism with him because he ain't say no bad names and shit. Yeah, he did. He said niggers, by the way, y'all. He said niggers. Then, here's the part that got me about him. I just got to say this. He said, this is his apology, because he gave an apology. He said, it was wrong. I'm embarrassed by it, but a lot of people need to realize you inherit things from your environment. And where I grew up was South Tampa, Port Tampa, and it was a really rough neighborhood, very low income. And all my friends, we greeted each other saying that word. That word was just thrown around like it was nothing. This was asked by Amy Robach, which was the interviewer who was, I guess, like asking him these questions or taking his apology. And she asked him if he had inherited a racial bias. And Hulk Hogan answered in the affirmative. He said, I would say that is very fair. The environment I grew up in, all my white friends, all my black friends, to hear the word on a daily basis when they greet me in the morning. That's what they'd say to me. Good morning, so-and-so. I think that was part of the culture and the environment I grew up in. Hulk Hogan then begged fans to forgive him. And he said, and this is what he said: "I'm a nice guy." And then he said he was at a low point in his life. In 2021 terms, you could say that he was trying to undo being canceled. This is what the article is saying. This right here, family. This is not now my thoughts here. This right here, family, is Mayo Babble, and not a real apology, by the way. His daughter was saying also too that he doesn't have a racist bone in his body. How, ma'am? How does he not have a racist bone in his body? He said in the recording that he was racist to a point. Hell, your ass could be racist. I mean, according to him, I mean, you're kind of dabbling in some others. And, there's a lot of, scenarios where white girls, when they're having their like fun time, dabble in brothers and then try to just go back to, white men. So, I mean, you could be on the same shit too. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I don't really know, because you kind of sympathizing for him after he done said some disparaging shit. And instead of calling him out and saying that, he was full of shit, you're sitting there and you're kind of backpedaling. So I don't know. You could be racist too. I mean, he blamed the shit on his damn environment. Being from a rough neighborhood and being low income doesn't make you a racist, and it certainly doesn't have to show up in your adulthood if you don't let it. Hulk Hogan knew that even if he got caught, he was still going to be forgiven. I think that's the bottom line here, family. That was the real Hulk Hogan, though, y'all. An anti-black racist who knows white privilege will work in his favor. This man was given a Hall of Fame suspension, and then it was later reinstated. Anyway, going back to what I was going to say, though, there were a lot of low-key moments of racism that show up in WWE. I mean, I'm going to give you some examples here real quick. They got Naomi in gimmicks where she's talking about snatching girls bald like she's a ghetto hood rat. They got Omos being treated like he's some type of beast. That's the big like African dude that is now in WWE. They had Do-Rag Vince. That was strange. They had New Day low-key having some racial undertones because they were treated like Sambos in a modern day minstrel show, shaking their asses and twerking with booty-os and shit. And remember, they had the slogan, "They make sure you ain't booty." And they almost tried a racist storyline with Mark Henry being a silverback gorilla until he vetoed that shit. They also treat R-Truth like he's a certified dumbass rapper. And remember when they gave him the imaginary friend Little Jimmy, and Triple H was sitting there trying to play him like he was a moron. I feel like they make R-Truth like Booker T with the IQ of a raisin. Like, I feel like that's what they do with his character. They also never elevate their black wrestlers either. And I've heard a lot of, suspected white supremacist rationalization, and a lot of them would would try to rationalize why that was. Man, well, if you look at the year to year basis, you can see that it's in 2011, dude, there are a total of 4 black wrestlers to 357.7 white ones. So the probability of a black wrestler being a champion is 0.074999 repeating, dude. You see, and that's the problem right there. Too much damn sympathizing and splaining. I even saw that Stone Cold Steve Austin played right into that on an interview or broadcast he was doing. And at some point he even had a guest on there who was low-key trying to check him, for some of the stuff that he was kind of like co-signing. He tried to pull the low numbers of black people argument, and I think he also tried to say that there was also a talent issue, like with some wrestlers like the Bobby Lashleys, and then there was also issue with looks and sizes with some of these black wrestlers. And he tried to make that argument to say that's why there hadn't been a lot of like black champions. And the caller, who in my opinion sounded like a white guy, I could have been wrong, actually brought up Daniel Bryan as an example, which I thought was an excellent example. And he said Daniel Bryan was small, he was elevated, and he doesn't have the look. Daniel Bryan doesn't have that look of that Vince likes, because he's on some weird shit. He doesn't have that look of like a Roman Reigns or even like somebody like that, or John Cena, but he was elevated. The bottom line is, if you compare the Shield to the New Day, these two tag teams were set up in the hopes to elevate the stars as breakout stars to a certain extent. I mean, think about it. New Day were 7-time tag team champions, and the Shield only had a small handful of championship wins. Every Shield member, who by the way is non-black, held the belt at least once. Even though they kind of played Dean to the left, a couple of them held the belt multiple times. So we can't even speak on, the number of times Roman and Seth were able to get it. Kofi, Kingston, and Big E were the only New Day members to hold the belt once each. And then the belt was removed from both of them in a very disrespectful manner, and they had a very lackluster reign, by the way. At least Roman and Seth had a pretty good reign. Roman has the belt right now. He's the longest probably reigning champion at this point, if I'm not mistaken. They made Kofi, I always call him Kofi. Kofi Kingston lose his belt to Brock Lesnar by getting squashed in literally a matter of seconds with just one F5. Xavier never even held the belt once. Naomi, who is a vet, only had one semi-long women's championship reign. In the rest of her tenure, she was basically treated like female Kofi doing tricks and shit at Royal Rumble. And if you really think about it, they don't have a lot of visible black champions who truly identify themselves as black. But here's the thing, though. There's a lot of talent with these black wrestlers. So the idea that this is not a thing is kind of like beyond me, and I feel like it goes back to the whole racism thing. The Rock, in my opinion, identifies far more with his Samoan side, and they try to exoticize him and try to put him in that kind of category. Bobby Lashley just recently got the belt, but he debuted back in 2005, and then he came back to WWE at some point, and he had been there for years before they put the belt on him. Kofi and Big E had lackluster reigns. To me, they could have even given Xavier the belt out of New Day. He has ungodly mic work, his wrestling is underrated, and he's been holding down one of the greatest tag teams in history of the company for a very long time, and he hasn't had one title shot. They could have had Shelton Benjamin, who could have been allowed to be champion because his wrestling was pristine as well. They could have elevated Booker back in the day, really, instead of making him the great value version of The Rock. Speaking of Bobby Lashley and Shelton Benjamin, that Hurt Business gimmick, that shit would have been on point if they didn't fuck it up. That was an excellent chance to elevate a bunch of talented brothers without there being a disrespectful gimmick attached. Also, speaking of tag teams, the Street Profits. Haven't you all noticed how they choose not to elevate Montez Ford, although he is very talented, but they elevate his wife as if she's the real badass of the couple, or kind of dominant? I hate that. I really hate that, y'all, and I've been noticing that low key. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I think they're an adorable couple. And I can tell he's a masculine dude, and she's feminine in her vibe overall. And it seems like they did that to kind of put a damper on that image, because they'll be walking around, they'll be taking pictures, holding hands and stuff like that. And I'm like, see, I love that. That's black love right there. I love seeing those images. And then y'all do something like that and y'all put a damper on that, and y'all not letting him be a champion himself outside of being sometimes a tag team champion. But You got Bianca Belair holding it down with the woman's belt. I don't like that. I don't like that, y'all. I don't like that one bit. And that's on purpose. Anyway, family, I've been talking here for quite a while. I'm over here getting tongue-tied and shit and all this other stuff. So let me go ahead and end it. And this episode here was done to just inform people about the way that anti-black racism shows up in entertainment sources that aren't even necessarily in comics or aren't necessarily even in some of the things that I have talked about, but they show up in places like, pro wrestling, where, you got some people who are just, throwing each other around, but the storylines and the way that, some of these things happen, like, have undertones of anti-black racism in them. So you just really got to just watch out for these types of things, family, because the honest truth is that a lot of racism that you see, and this is the lesson here, a lot of the racism that you see and that you're going to see is going to be hidden. It's not going to be in your face. So it leaves room for people to try to make these weird interpretations. You really are going to have to sit there and really look at this and dig things through, and then really just critically think. You can't sit here and just assume that everything is going to be given to you on a silver platter when it comes to racism. It's covert nowadays. So you're really, really, really going to have to dig. And I thought that this right here might help you kind of just look at it and put it all into perspective. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good day, and I'll be talking to y'all soon. Peace.